moving along, how do you size your battery? Well, what you want to do is your battery is your tank, and you want to figure out, you go back to that amp hours you need a day. That's your starting figure. You figure out how many days of reserve power do I need. So I have 2 days. A maximum will be 4, a minimum will be 1. In a cloudy area, you say 4. In an area that's very sunny, you don't need that much reserve in your battery. But you don't want to make your batteries too big, because what will happen is that people will run their batteries down and the battery will bounce around at the bottom. So then you divide that by the maximum DOD, that's depth of discharge. So 0.5 means that I don't want my batteries to go below 50% depth of discharge. And that's important. Why that's important is, again, you don't want to run your battery low all the time. You want to keep your battery fully charged all the time. So you want to keep your battery high. So depth of discharge shouldn't really go below 50% with a good battery. So what I need there, and do the math, you get, in this system, I need 700 amp hours. So I need 700 amp hours at 12 volts. So what I ended up getting was 4 350 amp hour Surette, which are 6 volts each, 2 in series, 2 in parallel, and that gives me 700 amp hours at 12 volts. Again, my book talks a lot more about this, but that's the basics of sizing batteries. Now, the inverter and the controller are basically sized to meet the needs of the solar array. So the maximum array short circuit is 40 amps. That's the maximum amps that I'm getting from the module. So you multiply that by 1.25, and it gives you 50 amps. So you want a charge regulator that can accept 50 amps. So you can see I have 2 charge regulators there. And then the inverter is based on the load, the maximum AC load. If I turn on all of my loads at the same time, it's going to be 586 watts AC. I multiply that by 1.25, which is a fudge factor, and I get 732. So I chose an 80 amp charge controller, and it's very much oversized, and I chose the 1500 watt inverter so that I can add more devices. So basically the charge controller and the inverter are based on your array and the appliances you use. The last step is sizing all the cables, fuses, and components. I'm not going to talk very much about it, but what I'm going to say here is that if you're not an electrician and you don't know how to calculate voltage drops, and you don't know how to connect wires together, and this stuff doesn't interest you, then what I would say is get a technician, get a handyman to help you out, because this stuff is if you haven't done it before, you're likely to forget a lot of stuff. So this is just to show you that there is a need for measuring the size of the cable, the conduit, the switches, the sockets, the fuses, the junction boxes, connector strips, lightning protection if you're going to use it, grounding, earthing, bolts, screws, nuts. Gotta figure all that stuff out. And my book goes through this in more depth, but it's hard work. It's for the technician. So when you put it all together, this is putting my system together. You can see that I have 186 amp hours per day from the load. You can see the DC load, the AC load, and the losses. I've got an array which is 500 watt peaks. I have a 700 amp hour battery and at 12 volts, and then I've got a 50 amp charge controller and a 1500 watt inverter. That's what I ended up with. And the next thing you do is you put a diagram. This is a little bit more advanced course, but you turn it into a diagram and you show how to wire it all up. So for small system designers, you need to understand what you're doing. You need to be able to seek advice. It took me 15 years to figure out how solar works. And if you're not a handyman, use a good handyman. Buy good quality components. There's a lot of junk on the market. use a good quality book. I'm selling my book right here, Standalone Solar Electric Systems. So that's my final advice. I hope this nuts and bolts has been interesting, and I hope people have fun installing their solar systems. There's a picture of us putting on unisolar tiles on the roof. Thanks very much.